Welcome to today's Association of the United States Army Thought Leader Podcast, Return of the King, bringing back the division artillery. This is Colonel Retired Dan Roper, AUSA's Director of National Security Studies. I will be serving as your host. To address this subject, we are fortunate to be joined today by an exceptionally qualified panel of experts. Dr. Dave Johnson, Lieutenant General Retired Sean McFarland, General Retired J.D. Thurman, Lieutenant General Retired Dave Halverson. Each has extensive experience in the coordination of fires and maneuver, both in a Cold War context and in the counterinsurgency campaigns that began in 2001. We will only briefly touch upon their myriad accomplishments in order to maximize time for discussion. Go to ausa.org/publications/AUSA studies to read their insightful April 2020 Spotlight Report entitled Massed Fires, Not Organic Formations, the case for returning field artillery battalions to the DivArty. Dr. Dave Johnson is a principal researcher at RAND who focuses on military innovation, land warfare, joint operations, and strategy. An adjunct professor at Georgetown, an adjunct scholar at the Modern Warfare Institute. He served 24 years in the U.S. Army, an infantry quartermaster in field artillery units in the continental United States, Korea, Germany, Hawaii, and Belgium, retiring as a colonel. He is a Master's of Arts and a PhD in History from Duke, a Master of Military Arts and Science from the Command and General Staff College, Master of Science from the Industrial College of the Armed Forces, and a Bachelor of Arts from Trinity. His work has been on the professional reading lists of the U.S. Army and U.S. Air Force Chiefs of Staff. He served on the Maneuver and Fire Center Advisory Boards as a consultant to the Defense and Army Science Boards and on the National Board of the U.S. Field Artillery Association. Member of the Council on Foreign Relations and the International Institute for Strategic Studies, he is author or co-author of numerous books, articles, and reports, including The U.S. Army and the Battle for Baghdad, Lessons Learned and Still to be Learned. Lieutenant General Sean McFarland is Vice President for Weapons Programs at General Atomics, an AUSA Senior Fellow and a non-resident Senior Fellow at the Belfer Center at Harvard. During his 37-year Army career, General Retired McFarland served in armor and cavalry units at every echelon, commanding an armored battalion in the Balkans, an armored brigade combat team in Iraq, the 1st Armored Division, 3rd Corps in Iraq, and also served as a commanding general, Joint Task Force North at Fort Bliss, Texas, the Deputy Commanding General of U.S. Forces in Afghanistan, and the Deputy Commanding General of U.S. Army Training and Doctrine Command. As Brigade Combat Team Commander in Ramadi, Iraq, he was instrumental fostering the Sunni Arab Awakening movement. While commanding 3 Corps, he commanded all coalition forces in the war against ISIS in Iraq and Syria from 2015 to 2016. A graduate of the United States Military Academy, Command and General Staff College, School of Advanced Military Studies, and the Industrial College of the Armed Forces, he has a Master's of Science in Aerospace Engineering at Georgia Tech. General J.D. Thurman operates J.D. Thurman Enterprises and is a Senior Fellow at the National Defense University for Capstone, Pinnacle, and Keystone programs. During his 38-year career, he commanded armored cavalry units in the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment, the 2nd ACR, and 3rd ID, as well as the National Training Center, the 4th Infantry Division, 5th Corps, and U.S. Army Forces Command. His final assignment was Commander of United Nations Command, Combined Forces Command, United States Forces Korea. His combat experience includes Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm with the 1st Cavalry Division, Chief of Plans and Policy for Allied Forces South in Kosovo, Chief of Operations, Coalition Forces Land Component Command during the invasion of Iraq, and Multinational Division Commander for all Coalition Forces in Baghdad in 2006. He also served as Deputy Chief of Staff, G357, for Headquarters Department of the Army. He has a Bachelor of Arts in History from East Central Oklahoma University and a Master of Arts in Management from Webster University, and is a graduate of the Command and General Staff College and the Army War College. In 2015, General Thurman was appointed by Chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Senator John McCain, to serve on the National Commission on the Future of the United States Army. Lieutenant General Retired Dave Halverson is Chairman and CEO of Cypress International. During his 37-year career, he commanded at battery, battalion, DivArty, installation, and installation management command levels. He was the Central Command Chief of Plans for Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom, and Deputy Commanding General for OIF 5/7. He served as Headquarters DA Director of Force Development, He served as the Commanding General of the United States Army Fire Center of Excellence in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and Deputy Commanding General of U.S. Army Training and Doctrine Command. His final assignment was U.S. Army Assistant Chief of Staff for Installation Management. He's got a Bachelor of Science from the United States Military Academy, Master of Science from the Naval Postgraduate School in Operations Research and Systems Analysis. He's a graduate of the Keenan Flagler Business School's Executive Development Program at the University of North Carolina. He's a graduate of the Field Artillery Basic and Advanced Courses, the Armed Forces Staff College, Army War College, and British Higher Command and Staff College, a lifetime member of AUSA and the Field Artillery and Air Defense Associations, chairman of the Field Artillery Association, and is on the Senior Advisory Group for the Fort Sill Commanding General. Gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to AUSA's Thought Leader podcast. We're going to tee up a few of the thoughts generated by your Spotlight report and ask each of you for your comments, beginning with Dr. Johnson, then Lieutenant General Retired McFarland, General Retired Thurman, and then Lieutenant General Retired Halverson. You assert in your AUSA Spotlight that in order to prevail in large-scale combat operations against competent adversaries, U.S. Army Divisional Field Artillery Battalion should be controlled by a Division Artillery headquarters rather than by brigade combat teams. Could you describe the rationale of centralized control of field artillery by looking at the U.S. Army's experience with artillery from when it began up through and including the invasion of Iraq and Operation Iraqi Freedom I? Dr. Johnson.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I think I'll start with a brief introduction of our essay before handing it off to General McFarland. So the history of the U.S. field artillery, as we discuss in this paper, is one of innovation to enable to better shoot, move, and communicate to support maneuver forces. I think the key breakthrough was in the 1930s with the creation of the ability to mask the fires of all available tubes through centralized technical and tactical control by a division artillery or higher artillery headquarters. This capability is atrophied as the demands of Afghanistan and Iraq did not require this capability, and field artillery units were repurposed for those wars. As part of modularity, the direct support field artillery battalions that were in division artilleries were put in maneuver brigade combat teams where they performed a myriad of missions, but were rarely looked to for mass fire support. Precision rather than area effects were the norm. There are also large cuts to field artillery force structure across the Army. I think it's important to understand, as we discuss in the paper, we face a different reality now with the demands of preparing for large-scale combat operations against peer adversaries as identified in the National Defense Strategy. This type of combat demands that all available field artillery be available to support the fight and to be controlled at division and higher. Whether these units are massing fires or being cued individually through sensors for multi-domain operations, they should never be in reserve. Hence, our recommendation reestablish division artilleries across the Army and to put the brigade combat team field artillery battalions back in division artillery. I'm going to turn it over now to you, General McFarland.
Thanks, Dave. As a brigade combat team commander, I was very fortunate to receive from the division artillery at the time a fully trained and prepared field artillery battalion that was integrated into my brigade combat team before we deployed to Iraq. Having that battalion with me that well trained was instrumental in our ability to effectively conduct counterfire fights in a very intense area of operations in and around the city of Ramadi in Anbar province. Counterfire times were driven downward to about 1 minute or less in order to catch the enemy before they were able to shoot and scoot. That would not have been possible had I been responsible for their training, probably because A, I'm not an artillery officer, and B, demands of training all the other units in the brigade would have distracted me from training that artillery battalion to that level of skill. So when we got back from Iraq, I wrote a paper along with Chef Snow, who commanded IBCT in 10th Mountain, and with Mike Shields, who commanded the 173rd Stryker Brigade Combat Team, bemoaning the fact that, now as brigade combat team commanders going forward, our successors would be burdened with the requirement to train their artillery battalions, and noting that there had been a noticeable decline in the skill of artillery battalions since we'd gone to the disaggregated DivArty concept. Fast forward to my time as a division commander in the 1st Armored Division, preparing for division-level exercises and trying to return to large-scale combat operations for warfighter exercises. All of my artillery battalions were down in the brigade combat teams. I asked a simple question. have any of you participated in reinforcing fires missions? Not a single hand was raised among any of the artillery officers in the room. The only person who knew how to do that was in the Fires Brigade, which had not yet been converted into a DivArty and was considered a modular unit, not organic to the division. That was a problem. Fortunately, we reconstituted the DivArty while I was in division command, but we only took halfway home. We did not bring the battalions back into the division artillery whole. And the division artillery brigade headquarters was significantly under-resourced in things like logistics, target acquisition, and other key functional areas that would enable it to truly support the division commander in a high-intensity fight. Then as a corps commander, we conducted a warfighter. I had no corps artillery. I had an artillery brigade, but it had to command multiple other artillery brigades. So that artillery brigade, the 75th Fires at Fort Sill, had to function as a force field artillery headquarters and counterfire headquarters. And that was too much to ask of it. Then when I deployed to Iraq and Syria to fight ISIS, I didn't get to take that artillery brigade headquarters that I had turned into a quasi-corps artillery headquarters. I picked up the 18th Corps Artillery's 18th Fires Brigade instead. Again, breaking that bond between units that are trained together and units that are fighting together. So I think aligning the DivArties with the divisions is a step in the right direction, but it doesn't go as far as it needs to. We definitely need to put those battalions back up under the DivArty where they can learn to mass fires, respond in a reinforcing, general support reinforcing, or general support role in support of the division commander and ultimately up to the corps commander level. And that way make full use of their capabilities. And now I'll turn it over to General Thurman.
Thanks, Sean, and to Dr. Johnson. Both of you, I think, really laid this out well. As you all know, I commanded in Korea. That was my last assignment. And what was clear to me when I started looking at how we were organized to accomplish the Korean mission set, I rapidly discovered we are artillery poor and not structured to fight large-scale combat operations to the levels that we need to be. My main focus was on fires because I had an artillery threat over there, and I think this paper lays out about 5 key points in here that everyone should look at, because the future that we're faced with, and it's laid out in the National Defense Strategy, against a China, Russia, Iran, or North Korea threat requires new solutions. When you're artillery poor, it's time to go back and look at what we've done to our field artillery and our overall fire support for divisions and corps. I make the assumption that we're going to fight divisions and corps for large-scale combat operations, which when you look at the magnitude that we are faced with a China or Russia, it's going to require our ability to improve fire support coordination at division and above echelons for corps and, as I stated, to support the joint force. We must be able to assure responsive fires across the theater of operations. So when I read the multi-domain operations manual and I look at expanded battle space, we've got to be able to operate from the tactical support area, close area, deep maneuver area, and operational deep fires area. This in itself requires us to relook the fire support structure, because at the end of the day, we want to maximize fires available to maneuver formations. And as Dr. Johnson rightfully said, ensure no artillery is ever in reserve. We must also restore the competencies the field artillery has always been renowned for in the past through better training. I will tell you, as a division commander in the 4th Infantry Division, the 4th ID in 2004 was the first division to convert to full-up modularity, where we added a 4th Ground Maneuver Brigade. We disbanded the DivArty. We created a Fires Brigade. And we moved all of the field artillery battalions back under the BCTs. Just like General McFarland pointed out, my brigade commanders, as good as they were not the experts when it comes to training field artillery folks. So I made the decision as a division commander early on that my Fires Brigade commander would have training readiness oversight. and I felt that was essential. When we got into Iraq, we had ended up with 13 brigades under the division operating under it. The span of control was very large, so it left folks on their own for fire support in a lot of ways. And I got to tell you, we had some bad habits develop, and it was clear to me coming out of Iraq that if we ever fight large-scale combat operations, we need to bring DivArtys back. So I'm 100% in favor of that. The other point that General McFarland discussed was fire support relationships. When you look at the overall fire support relationships of direct support, most people understand that. They do not understand reinforcing, nor do they understand general support reinforcing and overall general support. Because when you're artillery poor, you don't have the ability to do that with the way we're currently organized. Bringing DivArtys back will allow us to build that fire support structure back so we can maximize our fire support assets. You weight main efforts with fires. It is hard to do that when all DS artillery battalions belong to BCTs. And I would just say we've got to streamline the management of fires across divisions and corps. One of the things that I found in Korea that I needed was a force field artillery headquarters. And I did not really have that. I had a lot of ad hoc organizations, and I was also trying to build a combined fire support structure with the South Koreans. So again, I think now's the time to go back and for the Army to go back and relook its overall fire support structure. The Army's done a good thing when it comes to modernization. It's rightfully put long-range precision fires as the number one priority. Now I believe it's time to put Army fire support structure as a number one priority, because it will be essential when we start talking about trying to fight a large-scale operation that we may be called on to do sooner rather than later. And with that, I will turn it over to Lieutenant General Halverson.
Hey, thanks, sir. I just want to be able to say a few things. One, you've heard some clear tenets that each one, Sean and Dave and General Thurman said. One, this is about how we're organized to fight and how we are then prepared for this peer competitor fight that is facing us around the globe today. Artillery is very unique because it is an all-weather capability, and it can maneuver in all domains of the battle space, which then allows you to shift, as General Thurman said, and Sean, main priorities, main efforts, and all these types of things. But if we don't organize right, if we don't train as a team, if we don't have functional aspects of fire supporters being the eyes of the brigade commander that leads into capability at the division level and then corps and at the theater level, we will miss an opportunity to be able to fight and win the way we need to in a peer competitor environment. So this is not about looking back on what's been done, even though history will show you how fires can lead to winning and meeting your intent. It's how we also need to change and operate now for the future fight, because it takes time to train, just like General Thurman and Sean talked about. The technical and the tactical capabilities to be trained and ready, so your sensor to decision maker to shooter allows you that flexibility and adaptability to maneuver. We saw quickly in the Ukraine how the Russians had used their fires to shape an environment that had very, very lethal effects against their enemy. And what it showed you is that there was a organizing function and a training aspect of how they use lethal and non-lethal capabilities to meet the objectives they had to meet, that then woke up a lot of people to say, how are we going to fight? Which then led to a lot of things in the national military defense strategy to be able to think about and what our modernization should be. So when you do look, just like with General Thurman was mentioned, long-range precision fire is the number one priority. We need to get that modernization efforts for parity, and we need that range. We need that lethality. We need that capacity to be able to function. But if we don't train as we fight, we'll break in the team. What gives us, in many things we talk about today with our networks and how we discuss, and what gives us this adaptable, agile, moving capability that we say is innovative, it can be done by organizations where you have control and you have capabilities to shape at echelonment, abilities to be able to work your fire support relationships that weight main efforts, to take risk where other things. That's what mission command's all about, and that's how we need to posture. This article, what we really try to be able to do is look through the lens of many things to say we need to do and organize now so we are trained and ready for what may be facing us in the pure competitive environment. If we do that, we need to be able to put these no artillery in reserve, reinforce the fire support relationships, like we said, direct support, reinforcing, general support, reinforcing, and general support capabilities to allow that force package, and no matter what it may be, to go in and fight and win in that future environment, that all-domain environment we talk about. And I think even as we talk about modernization, even with the command and control nodes, we now, and even in what we've been seeing, that we're seeing is that joint fires is going to be an important thing. So we must work internally to the Army and posture ourselves for that capability so we can then fight and win. Thanks so very much for allowing us to talk, Dan. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks. I think anybody who's listening just got a PhD in fire support. You concisely addressed all the future questions I was going to ask you on modularity, the advantages and disadvantages of bringing back to DivArty. My takeaway from the great summary that all four of you provided was it's the combination based on the threats that we're facing now, not what we were facing in the Fulda Gap 40 years ago, is the Army sees that you need the combination of the long-range precision fires as its number one modernization priority. It needs a doctrine which will be driven by multi-domain operations concept to be able to fight large-scale combat operations, and it requires the organizations to enable that to actually happen. Otherwise, you don't have the flexibility built in. And the artillery poor Army that we have desperately needs a fire support command and control at the division and corps level, so there's some flexibility, because as we all know, you must have flexibility because nothing ever goes the way it's planned precisely. And the way it's decisively going to be shaped is with fires. In particular, if we're getting longer, more precise, more lethal fires, then we've got to make sure we've got a complementary organizational structure to leverage that. So to me, that's the quick summary of this. And then you can't have people that do that don't have the right training and leader development, because ultimately it's going to come down to that. So putting artillery leaders in charge of artillery training enables maneuver leaders to do what they need to do without the distraction of doing a whole nother job on top of that. And what I'd like to do is turn it over back to you in the same sequence and see if you've got any other closing comments, or you want to comment on what any of your co-collaborators on this paper had to say. So Dr. Johnson, over to you.
Yeah, I have a couple of things, I think. Sean talked about this in his experience as a BCT commander, but the atrophy of field artillery skills to include fire support coordination. I don't know how you do that in the BCT. When I was a direct support field artillery battalion commander in 25th Division, I looked to my DivArty commander for this kind of mentorship. I don't think a BCT commander can do that in these fairly specific skills. Finally, I think we're going to face a challenge, as you always do when you take something away from somebody. With BCT commanders who are used to having this capability organic, I think it'll be a trust-based understanding that they're going to have better fire support when they have this capability located at DivArty. Sean?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I would just add to that the challenge of positioning artillery for a brigade commander is one that he does not need. He's got enough on his plate, and as the Army acquires new systems like the extended range cannon, the URCA, that could potentially be well outside of his area of operations in the maneuver space. So it becomes another order of magnitude of difficulty for a guy who probably isn't getting enough sleep and has a lot of other things on his mind to try to figure out where to put his tube artillery that's supporting him. So as the ranges for these munitions and the existing M109s and 777s improve, once again, moving them, giving them a lot more flexibility on the battlefield and where we position them, and creating more of a headache for the brigade commander who doesn't need another headache. It just makes sense to put them up on a brigade headquarters like DivArty to worry about. And then, as Dave Johnson said, when he needs that artillery, it'll be there for him. And not just his own artillery battalion, but the ability to mask the fires of other artillery battalions as well, and then give him a decisive edge.
Yeah, thanks, Sean and Dr. Johnson. Great points here. When I look at where we find ourselves today, and I always try to go to doctrinal concepts and to look at how we're going to fight. And John Halverson talked about that. You look at the tactical support area as described in Multi-Domain Operations 2028. It talks about 500 kilometers plus. The deep area and deep maneuver area, 200 kilometers plus. Operational deep fires area, 500 kilometers plus. These are the areas that we're going to have to be really structured with appropriate command and control to build the necessary fire support structures. There's a couple of things that I always learned at NTC, and even when I was a Armor Brigade commander, and that was your overall concept of fire support associated with the commander's intent for fires. See, I don't think we train that enough anymore, and large-scale combat operations are going to require that. And frankly, comparing my time converting from the traditional structure to modularity, I never felt our brigade commanders had enough time to be able to properly train its fire support folks. Therefore, that's why you need DivArtys that can be brought back robust enough in force field artillery at higher echelons, particularly for theater and corps, to be able to manage the fire support that's required from the tactical support area all the way up through operational deep fires area. I think that's going to be essential because we have to be able to enable maneuver. And that's what fires does. But I think now is the time to really look at this as the Army always does. It makes the good decisions, but it's time to return BCT field artillery back to DivArty. And I think we need to act now and start training that to the appropriate level. Thank you very much.
If I could just pile on to what General Thurman just said. While it's necessary to return the battalions to the DivArty, it's not sufficient. As General Thurman was making his point about force field artillery headquarters, these DivArtys have to be able to fulfill their fire's responsibility as a force field artillery headquarters. They need to be able to integrate and direct ISR and target acquisition systems. They need to be able to command and control multiple battalions spread across the battle space. And they need to be able to see deep and think deep and plan deep, right? And right now, they aren't. And they also need to have the wherewithal to plan logistically to support all of those units. So we just need to make sure that DivArty is properly resourced at its echelon with enough target acquisition and enough staff to be able to fulfill that function as well. Over.
Exactly. Over to you, General Halverson.
Yeah, I would just want to close, and I think it was well articulated by the teammates here, is we don't have a choice. We have to posture ourselves to win. The environment in which we're going to fight is going to be much more complex, where we'll have pure competitors, with a lot of us saw it during the Cold War days. And I think now is the time. General Thurman described the environment that TRADOC PAM 525-3-1 multi-domains ops lays out. We have to organize so therefore we can train and give the capabilities needed to win. And that's lethal and non-lethal capabilities. And the integration of that is going to be so key to allow the commander to set his priorities and to shape the battlefield. So as you know, we fight and we win. And I think it's a great discussion we had today, and we really appreciate you taking the time for us, one, to spotlight us, and then two, to have the discussion right now so we can train as we fight. And I think all of us at all echelons have said if we don't train as we fight, we will be lost. And I think this is why it's a great time to organize so we can get on and prepare our leaders for success on the battlefield that they'll face in the future. So thank you very much, Dan.
Thanks to all of you for a fantastic discussion. Dr. Dave Johnson, Lieutenant General Retired Sean McFarland, General Retired J.D. Thurman, and Lieutenant General Retired Dave Halverson. We appreciate you being with us today and for sharing your insights and experiences, an initiative that's so important to our Army and the entire military. Looking forward, we're very interested in apprising how the Army responds to your timely recommendation that can significantly enhance the Army's capabilities so it can deter, and if it needs to fight, against revisionist powers that are now becoming peers that we're postured to fight and win on this large-scale combat operations type of battlefield. To all our listeners, thanks for joining us. Go to ausa.org/publications/AUSA studies to read Massed Fires, Not Organic Formations, the case for returning field artillery battalions to the DivArty.
To all our listeners, thanks for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to the Army Matters podcast on iTunes and everywhere podcasts are found. Join us next Monday with the brand new episode of Army Matters with Soldier Today. The Army Matters podcast series is brought to you by the Association of the United States Army, the U.S. Army's professional association, member-supported, Army-connected. Visit us at ausa.org for more information or to become a member. Your membership helps AUSA continue to carry out its mission to educate, inform, and connect with the total Army, our industry partners, and our supporters of a strong national defense. For questions or to provide topic recommendations, email us at podcast@ausa.org. Have a great Army Day. Hua.